Hello and welcome to my kitchen. Today I am going to be showing you how to make a dog bone birthday cake and giving you some helpful baking tips along the way. So enjoy and let's get started. All right, to start off with, we are going to make the vanilla cake. You can make this in any flavor that you want. What we're going to make is a doctored box cake mix recipe. So that means you're actually going to start with a box cake mix. In this case, I have a white cake mix. And you're going to add to that a box of pudding. In this case, I have vanilla. And then you're also going to add to that some vanilla extract, some sour cream, some eggs, oil, and water. Now, if you're making this another flavor, say chocolate, then you would use chocolate pudding, maybe chocolate milk instead of the water. You can change the flavoring. It really is a very versatile recipe because you just start with, a box cake mix of your choice, your favorite flavor, and then the flavor possibilities after that are pretty much up to you. All right, the first step for any baking is to set your oven. Now, talking about oven temperature for just a minute, if you want to be able to avoid that rounded cake top that you get, you'll want to set your oven actually a little lower than you see on the box cake mixes. So instead of at 350, I'm going to be setting my oven to 325. And let that preheat. All right, while the oven is preheating, we're going to go ahead and put together our mix. So I am a believer in this particular recipe of just the dump and mix method. So we're just going to throw everything in this bowl and then mix it up. So we're going to start with the cake mix. And then the pudding. Keep everything tidy as we go. All right, and then we're going to put in a half teaspoon of extract for flavor. One more quick tip, it does help to have all of your materials prepped before you get started, especially if you're making a video. So the next ingredient is sour cream. Now we need a cup of sour cream. Now in order to keep my measuring cup from getting all sticky and hard to get the sour cream back out of, I like to line it with a plastic sandwich bag. Just stick that in there, and then when I scoop my sour cream into it, it keeps it lined. Level that off. Now the sour cream and the pudding in this doctored cake mix actually give it a little bit of a denser texture, which makes it easier to frost, easier to carve, and definitely easier if you're doing any type of stacking. Okay, so now we're going to put this sour cream into the mix. So it came out all nice and clean, and then I can just throw that baggie away, and my measuring cup is still clean and able to be used for something else. All right, so after the sour cream, we are going to add 4 eggs. If we were making this, if we were worried about how white the cake was, we would just add the egg yolks, but we are just going to put in whole eggs. All right, and then we need a 1/3 cup oil. And a 1/2 cup of water. Like I said, if you were making this chocolate or a lemon cake, you could use lemon juice or something else. I'm making vanilla, so I'm just going to use water. All right, now we have all of our ingredients into the bowl. We are going to go ahead and mix that in my mixer for 30 seconds on low, and then 2 minutes on medium. Now, while the cake is mixing, I like to prep my pans. Now, in order to get my pans to be non-stick and the cakes to release easily, I use a homemade cake release. Now, what this is 1 cup flour, 1 cup vegetable shortening, and 1 cup of vegetable oil, all mixed together. And then I just use my brush to brush it into my pans, like so. This way you get in all the corners and everything releases out of the pans nice and easily. So now because we're making a dog bone cake pan today, and I'm just trying to do it in 1 cake mix, so we don't need it to be very large. I am using 5x2 rounds, which I know not everybody has, but this applies for whatever cake size pan you work with. And then I'm also going to be using a rectangle loaf pan for the middle of the bone. So I'm going to get all of these ready to go by brushing this in and up the sides so that it's nice and even in each and every pan. And I just keep this in my cupboard so that I always have it ready to go. 1 batch will fill a little more than this pint jar. So if ever I get running low, I just make a new batch and put it back in my jar and back in my cupboard, and it stays fresh and ready to go anytime that I am ready to bake. But it has been a lifesaver. I have not had any cake significantly stick to a pan since I started using it. It's definitely worth using, especially if you're baking frequently. And it works for all kinds of things. It works for cakes and works for brownies. Anything that you would normally just use a coating with a flour coat. So, all right, my pans are ready and my cake mix is ready, so we can start putting the cake mix in the pans. All right, it is time to start adding our batter to our cake pans. So I am going to put 1.5 cups of batter in each of the small rounds and then fill the loaf pan last. So I like to measure just to make sure that all of my cakes come out fairly even. So I'm going to use a measuring cup and a silicone spatula to get that all in there. Nice and even. Now your typical box cake mix doctored recipe makes about 6 cups of batter. So just want to make sure I have enough for the loaf before I add any more to the smaller cake pans. And it looks like it will be better if I just do one. Okay, so I did 1 cup each in the 5-inch rounds and then the rest of the batter into the loaf. Now the loaf may come out a little taller, but we can cut that down as we need it. Okay, so the next thing you're gonna do, and this is kind of noisy and kind of fun, you're gonna wanna knock all the bubbles out to kind of make the cakes bake more flat. So you're actually gonna take them and you're just going to whack them on the counter. That will kind of give them level. I like to kind of turn it halfway, partway through. But it gets the bubbles up from below and they will bake more level that way. This always scares everyone in my house. All right, now we're gonna put them in the oven. Okay, so we're gonna put the cakes into the oven, which is preheated to 325. We're gonna put them in so that they are evenly spaced. That way you get a little more even baking. And because we're cooking at a slightly lower temperature, only 325 instead of 350, we're going to cook them a little longer than it would normally say on a box cake mix. So we're probably going to cook these about a half an hour, and then I will check them and see if they are done. See you soon. So we're going to take these out and take a look. A couple of ways you can check cakes. You can either use a cake tester or a knife. Stick it down in, as long as it comes out clean, then it's done. The other way is just to use your finger, tap on the center. If it bounces back, then it is ready to come out. I'm going to place these over here on my cooling rack. Check the bigger one. Of course, deeper cakes sometimes take a little bit longer. But that one is also done. So you'll notice they do have a little bit of a dome, but not near as much as they would have if we had cooked them at 350. So we're going to go ahead and leave these to cool for 20 minutes in the pan, and then we will flip them out and let them come to complete cool. Okay, so about 20 minutes after I took the cakes out of the oven, I turned them out of their pans onto my cake rack and let them cool completely. It's been a couple of hours now and they are sufficiently cool, top and bottom, inside out. Now if you were doing a lot of carving, something more detailed, you might even want to freeze the cakes, in which case you would want to wrap them and freeze them, and if you have questions about that, you should ask me. But what we're going to do next is we're going to level these and get them ready to make them into the shape for our cake, for our Doug Bum cakes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to level off these because they do have a slight round. So we want these to be flat on top and bottom. So I'm going to take my serrated knife and hold it as level as I can. Frosting will fix some imperfections if you're not perfectly level, but pretty much you just want to cut off the little bump, and we're always having cake scrap bumps around my house for snacks. So you want to level those off so that they're fairly level. All right, I'm going to do that with each cake. All right, there's 2. And 3 rounds. And then, of course, our loaf one, which, as it has kind of crusty corners, I'm going to make sure and get those cut off too, so that nice and soft cake we're working with, because nobody wants to eat the crunchy round corners. Okay. All right, so now they are nice and level. Now the other thing we're going to do, because we're trying to make this into a dog bone shape, and obviously we are not there yet, is we are going to cut a quarter out of each one of these round parts. So I'm going to try to eyeball it and do it equally. Just cut a little quarter out of that. And then when we go to put that together, see where we're going here? Set that aside. You can use the previous cutout kind of as a template so that they all end up being about the same. All right, one more. Okay. So I have 3 little Pac-Man shaped pieces that we can put around the corners of the center of our bone. And then we can take these other 3 and make the 4th little side. That way you don't have to cook extra cake and have extra pieces left over. And we'll arrange that and make that work and fill in the gaps with frosting. But there is our shape. Now it's time to make some frosting so we can get this all assembled. We are going to make an American buttercream frosting. This is the Wilton recipe. So I'll also include that, but just so in case you ever need to look it up, it's the Wilton American buttercream recipe. And we're going to go ahead and put our ingredients in here and get it started. We're going to start with adding a 1/2 cup of softened butter. This has been sitting out while I made everything else, so it's nice and soft now. And then a 1/2 cup of vegetable shortening. I do prefer Crisco. I find it just seems to be smoother in my frosting. So I don't normally have a plug for a specific brand, but in this case, I think it does matter. Okay, and again, I lined my measuring cup with a plastic baggie so that when I go to pour that out, it comes out smooth and then the bag is disposable and the measuring cup is still clean. All right, and we are going to mix the butter and the shortening and 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract together until it's nice and creamy. So we're going to mix this until it is creamy smooth. So the butter shortening is creamy smooth now. We're going to start to incorporate our powdered sugar. So it's 4 cups of powdered sugar sifted. So it's really important that you sift this so that it doesn't have any lumps in it or it won't spread smoothly. So you do want to make sure that it is finely sifted before you add it. Make sure that that's in the right quantities so that everything comes out the right texture. The first time that I made frosting when I was younger and still learning, I was out of vegetable shortening, and so I thought I could use vegetable oil. And when I mixed that frosting up and spread it on the cake, it promptly slid right back off, and I had a puddle of frosting all around my cakes. So you definitely want to make sure you're using the right ingredients in the right amount. Now you're going to add this slowly, otherwise you're going to get a great big puff. Give me just a moment. I have a protective shield here to keep me from having a great big dust cloud of powdered sugar. Okay, so we're going to incorporate this slowly. It's going to be noisy, so we're going to be quiet for just a minute. Mixing as we go. When I get about half of it in, I like to let it just incorporate while I get the milk. You're going to want to add 2 to 4 tablespoons of milk, depending on the consistency you want. So I'm going to start with 2 and see where we go from there. Add the rest of the powdered sugar. My frosting's still a little thick, so I'm going to add another tablespoon of milk. Now you don't want to overbeat it or it will lose its consistency. So you want it to be, so we can get it out here for the camera. You want it to be able to stand up in peaks, but still be smooth enough to spread. All right, well, we're gonna get it ready to put on the cake. Okay, well, it is time to get to frosting. So we have our frosting all made nice and smooth. Now notice I have put the leveled side of the cake down so that I have the baked side up. Now the reason for that is less crumbs. So as we go to coat this, we're going to pull less crumbs up off the cake if we have these plain sides. Otherwise, you can do a crumb coat. Now what a crumb coat is a frosting that's a little runnier, not runnier, a little lighter consistency that you can put on under your regular frosting, and you just put that on really lightly. Another trick of the trade to keep this from sliding around, we're going to put some frosting underneath it. Kind of glue it down to the board. Okay. But as I was saying, if you crumb coat, you're just going to put a light coat, really light, so you can still even like see the cake underneath it, kind of like that. And then you're going to let that sit for about 10 or 15 minutes while it crusts over, which is something buttercream does, is kind of get hard. Not so hard that you can't eat it, but stiffer so that it so that you can frost again on top of it. And that will kind of trap any crumbs that you might have coming up into your frosting into that layer. And so when you put your final layer of frosting on, you won't have crumbs floating to the surface. Like I said, I shouldn't have a problem with crumbs because I am frosting the baked edges of the cake. We're going to put this on nice and smooth around this whole loaf. Coating the edges as well as the top. And try to get it nice and smooth. Rotate it as you go so that you can see the other side. Don't worry about getting down on your tray. Now the tray, because this is a rectangle and I don't have any dishes, I'm taking this to somebody else and I don't want to have to leave them with something that they have to bring back to me. I have just taken a sturdy piece of cardboard. This was the bottom of a Campbell's soup box, and double covered it in tin foil so that it is waterproof and frosting proof. And that way I can deliver the cake without having to worry about somebody returning my cake pans, my cake plates to me later. Okay, we don't have to make this quite perfect quite yet because we still have the other cakes to add. We just want to kind of make a layer for the other cakes to adhere to. And then we're going to add our round corner pieces to the outside here. Get them as snug as you can to the corners of that cake. Now this one, we are going to add some frosting in between, kind of stick them to each other as well. Now here you do have to kind of watch for crumbs. Now if you do find that you have some crumbs, like I do there, in your frosting, I recommend having a separate bowl to scrape your crumb frosting into so that you don't put that back onto the outside of your cake. But it's fine to keep using that on the parts that are going to be touching other parts of cake. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of glue those together so that they're the same shape as the others, as the other corners. We've got our basic dog bone happening there. Now what did I say? I want this layer up. So I am going to flip these over. It is going to make that easier to frost. Okay. And you can see there are a few gaps here. Frosting will fix that, or you can take a little bit of cake scrap that you cut off the tops of the cakes and wedge that down inside. Whatever is easiest for you. I'm probably just going to frost into it. So I'm going to going to cover those holes with my frosting. Kind of push it down inside so you don't have a gap. Be careful with this one that's in thirds because it will slide apart if you're not careful. One batch of frosting is usually enough to cover a single box cake mix if you're not stacking it and if you're not using it as filling. Fillings are fun, and you can use frosting as a filling, but in this case I'm just doing a single layer cake. I find the tops are easier to do first, and then the sides, and then the top again. So starting to look like a bone. We're still frosting. We're down to the edges now. A little trickier. And like I said, don't worry about what you get on the board because you can always clean that up with a wet paper towel. Around the sides, and smoothing as I go, especially on this one that's cut into quarters because we don't want it to come apart. And whatever peeks up over the top, we just smooth that over the top. If you happen to catch a crumb or two, just scrape that off into your crumble and then smooth it again. Okay, so we're gonna get that nice and smooth. Like I said, one batch of frosting usually covers a single cake box mix, but depending on shape and how deep it is and that, sometimes it does take a second one. So I am gonna go ahead and take a quick break. I'm going to make a second batch of frosting so that I have plenty to get all the way around our bone here. And then I will come back with a frosted cake and we'll do the finishing touches. Okay, so we got the cake all frosted white, completely covered, looks like a bone. Now we're going to decorate it up to be a birthday cake. So I have mixed 3 very bright colors here. I'm going to do some birthday decorations that way. Just added some coloring gel to 3 divided bowls of frosting and then just stirred it up with a spoon. Just try to get it nice and smooth so you don't have any white mix left in it, and then that's ready to go. So I'm going to try to do a rainbow decoration on this. So we're going to do this, best way to do this, into a piping bag, which has, put a coupler in that. Okay, so tighten my coupler on there for now. I'll put a tip on there in a minute. But first off, we're going to take these frostings and we're going to put them into some plastic wrap. And this just helps to keep everything from sliding back out the wrong end of my piping bag. So I'm just going to put a little of each color into the plastic wrap, fold up the bottom so it doesn't come back out at me. Roll it up kind of tight. Add a little more into that at once. Rest the three into here. Okay. Fold that up. Make it into a little tube of frosting, basically. And do that 2 more times. Now, if you don't have a piping bag, you can use a Ziploc that you cut the corner off of. I wouldn't recommend anything too thin, like plastic wrap or a thin sandwich bag. Freezer bags are usually best because they won't tear back through as you squeeze them. Now, because I'm going to give this a rainbow effect, I'm actually going to try to put all 3 of these bags into my piping bag at the same time, which is a little tricky. All right, now I'm going to put a tip on there. I'm going to use a star tip just for fun. And before I start piping on the cake, I'm going to do a little bit of a test pipe onto my paper towel here. So it comes out the way I want it to. You can see right now it's coming out mostly yellow, and I want the other colors to get down there. Okay, so we've got a bit of a mix. I think the green will come down there eventually. We'll get a very creative rainbowish effect. Also, when you're writing words on a cake especially, it's nice to make yourself a little bit of a template first. So you just take a toothpick and kind of write out where you want things to be. So I'm just going to write happy birthday here. I always tend to run out of space for birthdays, so if I do this in advance, I can smooth it out if it gets running out of room and try again. That looks like I got it this time. Happy birthday. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to keep that at a slight angle. And you're just going to draw down. And make an H and turn it slightly so I get a different color showing up on top. I like to do it in caps, just a little easier to read. And then just for fun, we're going to do some little rosettes here. If you do from the middle out, they kind of look like roses or polka dots. Because she's turning 8, I'm going to go ahead and make 8 of these. It makes a perfect place to stick candles. All right, so there we have it. Turn that around so that you can see. It says happy birthday with some polka dots. I'm going to take the rest of this frosting now and do an edge around the bottom here, just to make it pretty. And it doesn't have to be perfect. People appreciate it however it comes out. Just a little back and forth gives kind of a ruffle effect. Always at a 45-degree angle. All right, almost all the way around here. Okie dokie. There we go. Happy birthday, dog bone cake. I hope these tips were helpful, and that you have a great day. Bye.